part 8 of Firefox OS programming. In this part I'll introduce you to the web API of Firefox OS, or the web APIs. And first let's take a look on the following website: developer.mozilla.org/docs/web-API. On this page you can find a suitable explanation what web API actually is. Okay, well, Web API is a term used to refer to a suite of device compatibility and access APIs that allow web apps and content to access device hardware, such as battery status or the device vibration hardware, as well as access to data stored on the device, such as the calendar or contact list. That's basically all you need to know what Web API is. And if you look further down on this page, all the available web APIs are listed, and if you click on an API you get its description and an example. Okay, but before we start I have to explain you a few things. And if you can see, there are some APIs which don't have any badge attached to them, like certification required or non-standard, and there are other APIs which got them attached, like for example the Web SMS API, which is certification required and non-standard. So what do all these badges mean for you as a developer? Let me explain. Okay, let's start with the APIs without any badges attached. You can freely use them without asking anybody or without going through a certification process or review process. So if you want to use, for example, the Network Information API, you can use these lines of code without asking the user for any permission or Mozilla. That's the most simple API form you can use in your apps. And then there are the privileged apps. These are the privileged APIs. These are the APIs with the badge privileged attached. So what are privileged APIs? To make this clear, let's for example click on the TCP socket API, and then on the top of the appearing page you see in red here, this API is available on Firefox OS for privileged or certified applications only. So let's click on this link, privileged or certified applications, and scroll a little down, and here you have the explanation of what privileged apps are. Let me read this for you. Privileged apps. These apps are allowed to request increased permissions, and such as privileged apps must be verified and signed by a marketplace. Well, this actually means that first you have to add in your manifest, as I told you a few chapters earlier, you have to add privileges for this API to your manifest file. And second, these kind of apps, if you want to provide them on the Mozilla marketplace, they are getting reviewed by a team, and if everything is okay, they appear in the market. And if it's a bad app, for example, if you, I don't know, make phone calls without the user's permission, then the app is rejected. These are privileged apps. For example, if we go back to our list, the TCP socket API, or the device storage API, the contacts API, or the browser API. Okay, and last but not least, what are APIs with the badge certification required attached? Well, certification required means that you actually can't use them at the moment. If we click, for example, on the Bluetooth API and again click on certified applications only, we go to the description here, and certified apps. Certified apps can currently only be pre-installed on the device. This means nothing else than that third-party developer don't have access to certified APIs. Okay, but that's all for now for the description of the web APIs. And as I told you, we will start with the network API, the battery status API, and the geolocation API. Let's start. To prepare ourselves for these examples and the following ones, I created a new example called example 3, and this example is based on our last example with a few modifications. Let's start with the index.html file. Almost everything remains the same here. We have our footer and we have our header. What is important to note is that our MyStylesCSS file must be present, and our MyScripts JavaScript file must also be present. You can copy the whole folder of example 2 into example 3 and modify the index.html file as I tell you now. Okay, let's look at our content section. What did I program here in the content section? Okay, first I defined a button. Input type is button and gave it the value call API. We will use this button in our further examples to call the different API functions to trigger them. And the onClick event calls a JavaScript function called getData. We will define this function in our own JavaScript file in MyScripts.js. Below this button I defined a new div section with a data role of content, and I gave it the ID dynamic data. You can also use any other name you like, but I suggest you use the same here, dynamic data. And I also add a CSS class to this div element, and this class is called dynamic. The content of this div element is at the moment just the string test, and we will add here within this div element the result of our API calls. For example, if we will get the user's location, we will display the location here within the div element. That's all for our file index.html. And next, let's look our MyScripts.js file. You should ignore the commented out content at the moment. Just declare a function called getData with nothing in it. If we start our app in our simulator, I go to the dashboard and I click refresh. The simulator is popping up, and you can see here we have our button call API, our test string where we will place the result of our API calls, and because our JavaScript method is still empty, nothing should happen if I click this button. Okay, before I'll show you the 3 APIs I mentioned, battery status, network, and what else was it? TCP socket API now. Battery status, network, and first let me show you the screen orientation API, because this API is, I think, one of the simplest APIs you can use, and it is actually, for me, it is no API because it does not require or use JavaScript. How can this be? Okay, let me explain you. This will be very interesting. Besides our JavaScript file, we also included our own styles file called MyStylesCSS. And before I show you the result of what we will do now, let's look in our file MyStylesCSS. As from previous examples, we have the styles for header, footer, heading, and so on, heading first letter. And what is new now is, you remember, I defined a class dynamic here in our index.html file. I gave the class name dynamic to our content div element where we definition only takes effect if we are in orientation landscape mode of the device. As you can see, font size 32 points. This here is not 32 points. I don't know, perhaps 12 or 14 points, but not 32 points. Okay, all I was doing is adding this new style sheet to our mystyles CSS file and assign dynamic as the class name here in our HTML file. So let's see what will happen if I turn the device around to landscape mode. You remember we have a button here to do this. Okay, I will click it and oh, very nice. This here is 32 points actually. So what you can do with this API, with the screen orientation API, you can define different classes for the different screen orientation types. You could also add here color red or whatever you like, and if you switch the device's orientation from portrait to landscape mode or vice versa, the defined class is used. Very nice. For this functionality you don't need any line of JavaScript code, you just have to edit your CSS. But what is important for you is as a developer is, I think Android and iOS also offer this capability to disallow the user to change the orientation. Of course, the user can hold his smartphone in landscape mode, but you can force that the layout remains the same so that the user actually won't change to landscape mode. How can we do this? Okay, for this edition we need a little JavaScript. So let's go to our scripts, my scripts.js file, and I have prepared it here in this line. Let's remove it, the documentation, and simply call screen.mods.lock_orientation and as a value give the string portrait. This means that the device won't change the layout to landscape mode. It will remain in portrait mode. Okay, I will save the file and let's check this out. I have to restart the whole simulator that this will work. Refresh. The same app is popping up. We still have our button with no function. And what happens now if I click orientation change? Okay. Why does it still work? I'm not sure. Let us look what's wrong here. Lock orientation portrait. It should work. I don't know what I have done wrong. Let's perhaps try it here within the method. It's still working. Reloading. Ah, okay. I don't know what it was, but perhaps some bug in the simulator. I'll reload it again. And if I try now to change the orientation here, the simulated orientation in our simulator, it doesn't work anymore. Okay, let's come to our second web API I want to introduce in this part. Close the simulator again and remove the screen lock orientation here. And let's add another functionality, the functionality to get the current status of the battery. And for this purpose we add a new line here at the top in our JavaScript called var, for variable declaration, battery, and we assign battery the value of navigator battery. battery is not supported, the browser will try Navigator mods battery or and Navigator WebKit battery. These are the different implementations of the different web browsers. So if you want to develop apps, for example for Tyson or for just another browser, you should always, if possible, include or try to get all these objects. The JavaScript, this object battery will be assigned the first matching object. For Firefox OS, you could just use Navigator battery or no, mods battery, of course, Mozilla mods battery. Then you would have the same functionality, but as I said, just try on always these three to get one of these three objects. So that object Navigator battery is stored in our battery variable at each time we reload our app. And now let's come to our function getData, and you can see I have already prepared a line here. Document getElement by ID, dynamic data, inner HTML, and as a value we assign a string. The battery level is at plus battery.level. With battery.level you get the level of the current battery, and we make this times 100 to get the current percent value of battery.level, because battery.level you get a value between 0.0 and 1.0, I think. So we just do this times 100 to get the correct percentage value. Okay, we have defined our getData function, and the element dynamic data, as you remember, is our element here, our content element. We gave it the ID dynamic data. So if we press the button in the app, the text test should be replaced with the text we define here in our script. The battery level is at percent. Okay, let's save the file and try this all out. I go back to the dashboard, refresh our app, and see what happens if we click now the Call API button. Perfect. The battery level is at 45%, and you can see it is true. Let's proceed to the next API, the network status API. First, I remove this line here and the declaration of our battery object. All you have to do for this example is get another object called network, and like for battery you have the three options to check: Navigator connection or Navigator mods connection or Navigator WebKit connection. The runtime will provide you with the correct object found and store it in our network variable. And in our function getData, just add the following line, the same as for battery: document getElement by ID, dynamic data, inner HTML, your current bandwidth is, and then instead of the battery.level, just add network.bandwidth and add mbps for megabits per second, and save this file. And now let's see what will happen in our simulator. I reload it, and before I press the button, let me tell you, you will be disappointed. I press it and your current bandwidth is undefined. So why undefined? I can only speculate. I think this is because we are running within the simulator and not an actual device. But I didn't test this on a device, but it should work, so feel free to try it out. this concludes the 8th part of Firefox OS programming tutorial. I introduced you to the web APIs, what web APIs are and what you have to do to use them. And in this example I just introduced the APIs without any further certification or the privileged APIs. I showed you some APIs which you can use without any permission. And in the next part we will talk about the geolocation API. For this API you will need permission from the user, and you have to declare the permissions in your manifest file, and we will change the JavaScript to actually get the location of the user. Okay, that's it. I hope I will see you in the next part, part 9, Web APIs, where I introduce you to the geolocation API and perhaps some other interesting